It started with a sound. Not a scream, not a crash, but the unmistakable thud of a heavy door being forced open, the kind of sound that changes everything in an instant. In the quiet, guarded streets of Montecito, California, where luxury hides behind manicured hedges and security gates, blue and red lights sliced through the night. Residents peeked through their curtains. No one dared step outside. Not here. Not when the FBI was involved. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But the name at the center of it all, that's what sent shockwaves across the globe. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, former actress, humanitarian, royal rebel, and now, the woman whose home had just become the center of one of the most unexpected investigations in modern royal history. And you have to ask yourself, what could possibly make the FBI storm the home of a royal figure? Drugs? No. Weapons? Not a chance. Something far more dangerous was hidden in that house. Something invisible, digital, and deeply personal. Inside those walls, authorities uncovered what many are now calling the Windsor Files. And the things they found weren't just private. They were explosive. Now imagine this. Hard drives tucked away in a hidden room. Not in a safe. Not in an office. But in a part of the house no one even knew existed. A space built behind a wall, invisible to the naked eye, shielded by soundproofing and biometric locks. And inside, hours, no, years of secret recordings. Not interviews, not documentaries, but phone calls, private meetings, royal family conversations, and not just between anyone. These were moments between King Charles, Prince William, and other senior royals. Conversations never meant to be heard by outsiders, let alone captured, stored, and encrypted on foreign soil. The moment the agents realized what they were looking at, one of them reportedly muttered under his breath, "This isn't just a case. This is history." So how did it come to this? How did the woman once celebrated as the modern face of the monarchy end up under federal investigation? And who tipped them off about that secret room? You're about to find out. But to truly understand the scale of this, we need to go back, before the sirens, before the raid, before the flashing lights lit up the Montecito night. Because this story doesn't start with the FBI. It starts with a whisper. A whisper that began with one of Meghan's closest staff members, someone who, until recently, worked behind those guarded walls. Someone who saw things they were never supposed to see. But before we get there, let's talk about the atmosphere inside that mansion. To the public, Meghan and Harry's California home was a symbol of success, the couple's Freedom Palace. A place where they'd rebuilt their lives after stepping away from royal duties. But behind that beautiful facade, cracks were forming. Harry had grown increasingly withdrawn. Neighbors reported hearing late-night arguments, muffled voices, and even moments of eerie silence that followed shouting matches. Insiders claimed Meghan had become obsessed with controlling her image, not just publicly, but within every layer of her personal life. She didn't just want privacy. She wanted control. And control, as we would later learn, came in the form of documentation. Every call, every conversation, every glance, every whisper, cataloged, archived, and, in some cases, recorded. She called it protection, but others saw something much darker, surveillance. Even Harry, by that point, didn't seem to know how far it went. According to an investigator familiar with the case, the FBI wasn't initially after Meghan at all. They were tracking data breaches connected to a network of celebrity media leaks. But one trail led them to California, then to Montecito, then straight to Meghan Markle. It wasn't until they cross-referenced digital metadata from leaked royal stories that they discovered something chilling. Certain recordings of royal conversations, private, verbatim, matched timestamps from devices linked to Meghan's network. That was when things started moving fast. A judge approved a warrant. A specialized digital forensics team assembled quietly in Los Angeles. And at exactly 2:47 a.m., the gates of the Sussex residence swung open to federal agents. What they expected to find were financial documents. What they actually found was a hidden archive. Behind a mirrored wall in the basement, the one no contractor claimed to have built, was a reinforced door. No keyhole, just a small biometric scanner. It took technicians several hours to bypass it. And when they finally entered, what they saw left them speechless. Rows of high-end computer servers lined the walls, glowing faintly blue in the dark. A single ergonomic chair sat in the center of the room, facing a large monitor grid, 8 screens in total. Each screen displayed folders, Project Windsor, Crown Audio, emergency calls, media control, hundreds of terabytes of data, audio files, video recordings, transcripts. Imagine being an agent in that room, staring at the screen as one file plays, and hearing Prince William's voice on the other end of the line, talking about the family's private affairs. It was undeniable. These weren't media clips. They were personal, raw, real, and that was just the beginning. Now pause for a second. Ask yourself this. What would drive someone to record the most powerful family in Britain? Was it fear, revenge, or insurance? Because depending on who you ask, Meghan wasn't spying. She was protecting herself. At least, that's how she saw it. Insiders claim she'd confided to a close friend months earlier that she feared being erased. That one day, the royal family would rewrite her story and paint her as the villain. So, she began collecting her own evidence. At first, it might have been harmless. Voice notes, voicemails, maybe even a few private recordings to prove her version of events. But as her feud with the palace deepened, that need for proof transformed into an obsession. The FBI later revealed that some of the recordings stretched back to early 2018, before the couple even left royal life. Meaning, these secret archives weren't new. They'd been growing for years. And the deeper the investigators went, the more disturbing it became. Encrypted drives led to cloud backups. Cloud backups led to secure servers hosted overseas. And those servers were connected to a network of third-party accounts, some registered under false names. Who set them up? Why were they cross-linked to Hollywood PR firms? And most importantly, who else had access? Because one folder, labeled shared, wasn't just synced locally. It had been remotely accessed multiple times in recent months, from locations outside the United States, including one IP address in London, another in Toronto, and a third inside a royal residence. That detail alone sent investigators into overdrive. Was someone in the royal circle complicit? Was this bigger than Meghan? Or had she simply entangled herself in something far more dangerous than she realized? By the time daylight hit Montecito, the entire operation had gone silent. The house was under lockdown. News hadn't yet leaked. Harry and Meghan were nowhere to be seen. But neighbors described the scene. Unmarked vehicles, agents moving boxes, and evidence bags containing small drives and tablets. One witness claimed to see an agent carry out a framed portrait, unaware that behind it was the passage to the hidden room. When word finally broke online, the internet exploded. Social media lit up with speculation. Has Meghan been arrested? Are the royals being spied on? Is this revenge for the palace's silence? Every news network wanted answers, but the FBI refused to comment. And that silence, that chilling, calculated silence, was more terrifying than any headline, because it meant one thing. They'd found something. And according to sources close to the investigation, what they found could shake the very foundation of the British monarchy. You can almost feel it, can't you? That uneasy balance between public image and private truth. The sense that behind the smiling photos, there's a story we were never meant to hear. But that's exactly what those recordings were. Stories the royals never thought anyone outside the palace walls would ever know. And as the FBI began to piece it together, the narrative started shifting. Was Meghan truly a manipulator, or had she been collecting proof of royal misconduct all along? Was she the villain, or the ultimate insider-turned-whistleblower? The line between guilt and defense began to blur. And that's when they opened the file that changed everything. It was labeled simply, William, Confidential. Inside that file was the recording that would send Buckingham Palace into panic mode. A conversation between Prince William, King Charles, and a senior royal advisor. A recording that shouldn't have existed. A recording that would soon leak into headlines across the world. But before that, before the world knew, before the fallout began, the FBI sat in stunned silence, listening to words that could upend 1,000 years of royal tradition. And as one agent reportedly whispered under his breath, staring at the waveform on screen, this could destroy them. But what was said in that call? How did Meghan get it? And who else knew it existed? Because once the truth about that single recording came out, nothing about the royal family or Meghan Markle would ever be the same again. And that's where our story truly begins. Because what came next would change everything. and no one saw it coming. Every mansion hides a secret, but this one hid a room that even Prince Harry wasn't allowed to enter. For years, staff whispered about it. A door that stayed locked. A part of the house that no cleaner, no electrician, no friend was ever permitted to touch. Some said it was a meditation room. Others swore it was a private office for Meghan's creative projects. But the truth was far more dangerous. Let's go back to how it all began. When Meghan and Harry bought their Montecito mansion, it was hailed as a symbol of freedom. 12 acres of perfection. Palm trees, rose gardens, rolling lawns, and panoramic ocean views. It was everything the couple said they had wanted: privacy, peace, and a place far away from the watchful eyes of the British tabloids. But from the moment the moving trucks left, something strange began happening inside those walls. Construction crews arrived, not the same ones who built the house. Private, quiet contractors. They worked odd hours, late nights. No uniforms, no company logos. When neighbors asked, they were told, just small renovations. Yet there was no noise, no hammering, no drilling, just silence. And when a curious staff member once asked what exactly was being built, she was told sharply, "Don't ask again." At first, it seemed like paranoia, the kind of secrecy celebrities use to protect their image. But soon, even Harry started to notice things that didn't make sense. Rooms with rewired power lines. Security cameras moved without his consent. A section of the house where Wi-Fi mysteriously cut off. He asked Meghan once, jokingly, "What are you building down there, the Batcave?" She smiled, said it was just a workspace, then changed the subject. But here's where it gets strange. The floor plans Meghan submitted for insurance didn't match the house's actual layout. There was an additional chamber, small, windowless, marked only as Utility Room B. Except, there was no Utility Room B. It didn't appear on any contractor's paperwork. It didn't show up in delivery records. And yet, deliveries kept arriving. Soundproof foam, specialized wiring, encrypted servers, and equipment only used for secure digital storage. So how did nobody notice? Simple. The deliveries were labeled archival materials for the couple's charity projects and podcast work. To the outside world, it all looked innocent. But deep inside the house, beyond a mirrored wall in the basement, a secret door took shape. The builders who installed it later admitted under oath that Meghan insisted on total confidentiality. They weren't allowed to bring phones. No photographs. No copies of the blueprints. She reportedly referred to the project as the archive. One contractor described it vividly. It wasn't a normal home office. It looked like something you'd find in a government facility. Reinforced walls, sound dampeners, ventilation control, a separate power source. Whatever she wanted in there, she didn't want anyone hearing it. And she got exactly that. Even after the construction ended, no staff member was allowed inside. The cleaning crew was instructed to skip that area. Maintenance workers were told the room was unsafe due to sensitive equipment. But the strangest detail? That mirrored wall, the one that concealed the entrance, was imported from a custom manufacturer in Switzerland. Its reflective surface was designed to distort motion, making it nearly impossible to detect the door seam from the hallway. A Hollywood illusion, built for secrecy. Months later, Meghan's assistant at the time, identified only as S, recalled something chilling. She said Meghan would often disappear for hours and re-emerge calm, almost euphoric. She'd go in angry, tense, and come out smiling, like she'd just handled something. What was she doing inside? That question haunted the staff for months. Until the day one of them accidentally stumbled too close. It was a stormy evening. The power flickered. The house's generator tripped, cutting off electricity to part of the lower level. When the lights came back on, the mirrored wall in the hallway reflected something odd, a faint glow from behind it. S swore she heard a sound, a faint beeping, like a computer booting up. Then a woman's voice. Meghan's voice. Talking. But she wasn't on the phone. The assistant said it sounded like a conversation, except no one was answering her. Moments later, Meghan appeared from the hallway, startling her. Calm. Cold. Never come down here again, she said quietly. S quit a month later. At the time, no one took her warning seriously. But years later, when federal agents entered that same corridor, they realized that glow had been real. Behind the mirrored surface, hidden within the wall, was a biometric lock. Fingerprints. retinal scanner, dual authentication. Even Harry couldn't open it. And that's when agents knew. This wasn't just privacy. It was something else entirely. They dismantled part of the wall, revealing a sleek, soundproof door. Once breached, the temperature dropped several degrees. Inside, rows of sleek black servers lined the walls, their fans humming softly. A single chair sat before a control station, multiple screens arranged in a grid. Each monitor displayed folders and file paths. One was labeled Project Windsor, another, Project Crown, a third, Emergency Calls. Every drive was encrypted, every file protected by layers of security. But even before decoding anything, the agents could see fragments of data, waveforms, voice logs, video thumbnails. And here's the eerie part. On one screen, the playback window was still open, frozen mid-frame. An audio file paused halfway through. The title? Family Meeting, January 2020. The room smelled faintly of perfume, Meghan's signature scent. An open notebook sat nearby, with scrawled lines in black ink. One phrase repeated twice. Truth must be documented. For protection. When one agent picked up the page, another spotted a tiny symbol etched into the server frame. The crest of a private cybersecurity firm based in Toronto. The same firm that once handled PR analytics for Meghan and Harry's charitable foundation. Coincidence? Not a chance. That connection tied everything together. This archive wasn't just for safekeeping. It was a sophisticated surveillance system, storing and categorizing years of digital data. And the timeline matched too perfectly. Every folder correlated with major royal events. The wedding, the Australia tour, the Oprah interview, even the Platinum Jubilee. As if someone had been documenting every single milestone, but from the inside. Imagine standing there, staring at the screens, realizing that the person behind this had been recording the private world of royalty for years. Not tabloids, not journalists, but a royal herself. And the question everyone in that room asked, though none dared say aloud, was the same one echoing in your mind right now. Why? Was this blackmail? Insurance? Or just the desperate act of someone who felt constantly watched and decided to watch back? Some agents argued it was defensive, that Meghan feared being framed or silenced by the monarchy. Others saw something darker, the calculated control of a woman determined never to lose her narrative again. Whatever her motive, it was undeniable. She had built herself a fortress of secrets, a digital diary of betrayal, ambition, and fear. And tucked among those drives was a folder that would soon dominate the headlines. It was smaller than the rest, barely a few gigabytes, but its name stood out. William, Confidential. It contained not just one, but several recorded calls between Prince William and senior palace members. Calls never meant to exist. One agent later described that moment like this. It felt like we had opened a door to Buckingham Palace without ever stepping foot inside. You can imagine the chill that must have run down their spines. The realization that the voices echoing through those speakers weren't celebrities or politicians, but the future King of England. And somewhere, miles away, Meghan had once sat in that same chair, headphones on, listening. But here's the twist. Even as the FBI uncovered this, they had no idea how she'd recorded them. There were no visible listening devices inside royal residences. No physical bugs, no wires. So how had she done it? That mystery would soon lead them to another discovery, something that connected directly to Harry himself. Because the FBI would later find that one of the recording devices wasn't in England at all. It was in California, and the voice that triggered it belonged to Harry. That meant one thing. She hadn't bugged the palace. She'd bugged him. And that revelation, that devastating, personal twist, would not only destroy what little trust was left in their marriage, it would also force Prince Harry into the center of an international investigation. But that's later. Right now, the agents were still standing in that mirrored chamber, staring at the blinking drives that pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. One of them said quietly, "This isn't just evidence. This is power." Because whoever controlled those recordings controlled the truth. And as dawn broke over Montecito, and word of the raid began to ripple across the internet, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about Meghan Markle anymore. This was about secrets buried deeper than anyone imagined. Secrets that could expose, protect, or destroy the most famous family in the world. And in the center of it all, that locked room. her hidden sanctuary, her vault of truth. But what the agents didn't realize yet was that one of those recordings, the one marked Emergency Palace Call, would set off a chain reaction that would shake the monarchy to its core. Because when that file was finally played, and the voices echoed through the speakers, something was said that could never be unsaid, and what came next would change everything. It always starts with something small. One file, one line of code, one careless click that unravels an empire. In this case, it was a hard drive. A single black, unmarked drive tucked into a drawer beneath a stack of papers, almost invisible to the untrained eye. But to the FBI's cyber forensics team, it was the smoking gun. It wasn't labeled top secret. It didn't scream importance. In fact, that's what made it suspicious. Everything in the hidden room was meticulously organized, color-coded, time-stamped, named with precision. But this one, it was blank, anonymous, almost as if it didn't want to be found. One agent, a digital specialist named Morgan, noticed it as she scanned the drawers for removable media. She later said it felt out of place, like someone had tried to bury it in plain sight. When she plugged it into her portable terminal, the screen flickered. Encrypted partitions, layers of hidden directories, a digital labyrinth. And then, one folder surfaced. It was titled Project Windsor. That name alone sent chills down the spine of everyone in the room. Inside were several subfolders, meetings, calls, archive, and one marked simply, confidential. When agents clicked into it, they found audio files, hundreds of them, each one labeled with a date, a location, and a name. March 2019, Frogmore. April 2020, Clarence House. January 2020, Emergency Call. The timestamps were consistent, precise. Whoever recorded these didn't just capture random conversations. They were cataloging moments, building a digital timeline of royal history from the inside. Now here's where things get even darker. Every single file was encrypted with a cipher unique to Meghan's known devices. Her digital fingerprint, the same one used for her charity correspondence and Netflix production archives, matched the encryption. In other words, there was no denying it. These were her files. But the question remained, how? How did she obtain recordings from inside the walls of Buckingham Palace? And why would someone who once called the royal family, her new family, secretly collect their most private conversations? The answer, investigators believed, lay in intent. They examined metadata, tracing connections between the files. One audio clip, the January 2020 call, had been uploaded to a private cloud just hours after Harry and Meghan's official announcement of their royal exit. Coincidence? Not likely. The FBI suspected this particular drive wasn't meant to be found in the US at all. It had been transferred, possibly smuggled, from an overseas location. One digital trace pointed back to a server in London used by a now-dissolved PR consulting firm with ties to Meghan's old media network. That's when the agents realized this wasn't just a local investigation. It was international. Now, let's pause here and ask something simple. Why risk it? Why would Meghan, a woman already under scrutiny, keep recordings that could incriminate her? Some said paranoia. Others whispered leverage. But for those who've studied her closely, her meticulous nature, her obsession with image control, this was about power. Not money, not fame, power. Because information, especially royal information, is the ultimate weapon. Inside one of the decrypted folders, the agents found internal palace phone call transcripts. Not summaries, verbatim transcripts. Lines of dialogue. Names. Times. Even mentions of Operation Sussex, a code name used privately by palace staff to handle crisis communications after the Oprah interview. Whoever compiled this didn't just want to remember what happened. They wanted to control how it would be remembered. And then came the recording that would blow the investigation open, the one that gave this chapter its name. File 27B. Timestamp, January 8, 2020. Length, 37 minutes, 24 seconds. Title, Emergency Palace Call. When the agents pressed play, silence filled the room. Then, a familiar British voice, steady, authoritative, cut through the static. William here. Prince William. He was speaking to King Charles and an unnamed advisor. The tone was urgent, tense. You could hear the tremor of frustration, the kind that only comes from family. Charles sighed audibly before saying, "It's already out of our hands. They've made their decision. William replied sharply. But this can't be how it ends. There must be control, boundaries. This can't become a media war. The conversation went back and forth, the royals debating how to handle Meghan and Harry's shocking decision to step back from their duties. You could hear the desperation, the confusion, the sense that the family was fracturing in real time. And then something else. A faint rustle. A click. Are we being recorded? William suddenly asked. The line went silent for 2 full seconds. Charles responded, almost dismissively, of course not. It's a secure line. But the irony of that moment, that one chilling line, wasn't lost on the FBI. Because that call, that moment, had indeed been recorded. Not by the palace, not by the British government, but by Meghan Markle's secret digital system thousands of miles away. So how did her system get the feed? That was the question that consumed investigators for weeks. They began mapping the data packets, tracing the call's digital signature back through encrypted tunnels. And what they discovered shocked even the tech experts. The data trail didn't lead to London. It led to California, to Harry's personal mobile device. In short, Meghan's system had been syncing audio data through Harry's phone, piggybacking on his contacts, call logs, and even private voice memos. Every time Harry spoke to his family through certain apps, data mirrored automatically to her private network. Whether Harry knew about it or not, that was a question no one could answer. Imagine being one of those agents, realizing that this wasn't an external hack. It was intimate, domestic, the kind of digital infiltration that could only come from someone inside the circle. One FBI analyst later described it like this. It was as if she'd turned her own husband into a royal wiretap without him realizing it. That revelation turned the entire case upside down. Because suddenly, the focus shifted. This wasn't just about illegal surveillance. It was about betrayal. Every file on that drive represented a conversation between trust and suspicion, between marriage and monarchy. The analysts found one note in the metadata written in Meghan's encrypted handwriting font, a personalized script she used for secure journaling. It read, "They'll twist our words. Better to keep the originals." That single sentence was both confession and justification. But the more they decoded, the stranger it got. There were edited audio clips, moments that had been trimmed, rearranged, perhaps prepared for release. One folder titled Media Drafts contained waveforms labeled with phrases like sympathy cut, royal conflict, and truth real. It suggested a strategy, a calculated plan to control public perception using these recordings if needed. And if that's true, then Project Windsor wasn't just a collection. It was a weapon. When the digital team presented their findings to the lead investigators, there was silence. No one wanted to be the first to say it. Finally, Morgan spoke. She wasn't just keeping receipts. She was building an arsenal. But that realization raised another, deeper question. Who else knew? Because some of the recordings showed signs of being shared. Encrypted copies had been accessed by remote IP addresses, one in Toronto, one in Los Angeles, and one traced to an office building in London registered under a public relations agency. Who was receiving them? And why were some of the files marked negotiation assets? That phrase caught everyone's attention. Negotiation with who? The palace? The media? Or perhaps Netflix, who had recently paid millions for exclusive Sussex content. The deeper the FBI dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't random digital hoarding. It was chess. Every file, every recording, every secret. A piece in a long game Meghan had been playing since the beginning. But here's where the emotional gut punch lands. Among those hundreds of files, one stood apart. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't even in the main directory. It was buried deep in a hidden partition only accessible through an authentication token tied to Meghan's biometric data. Once decrypted, the title flashed. Harry, confession. Inside, a voice memo. Harry's voice. Raw. Vulnerable. Recorded late at night. He spoke about his guilt, about the toll the public scrutiny had taken on their marriage. He mentioned therapy, resentment, fear. He admitted he missed his brother. And at the end, his voice broke when he said, "Sometimes I wonder if leaving was even my choice anymore." That file, that one haunting recording, told investigators everything they needed to know about who was really in control. Because even though Meghan wasn't speaking in that file, her presence was everywhere in it. And the fact that she'd labeled it as part of Project Windsor proved that nothing, not even Harry's pain, was off limits. When agents brought that up during internal debriefing, one of them reportedly muttered, "This isn't surveillance. This is strategy wrapped in emotion." And just like that, the FBI realized they were no longer just handling a privacy case. They were handling a potential blackmail archive involving the British royal family. The room fell silent as the lead investigator said, "This is no longer just about her. This is about what she's holding and what she plans to do with it." And as if fate itself were listening, one of the screens flickered. A new alert popped up. A live synchronization notice, meaning someone, somewhere, was still remotely connected to Meghan's system, even as the FBI examined it. Whoever it was, they had access, real-time access, and within seconds, the active session terminated. Files began vanishing one by one. The agents scrambled to pull backups. Servers whirred. The screens dimmed. By the time they regained control, one folder had been completely erased. The missing one? William, confidential. That was the moment the investigation shifted from secret to urgent. Because if someone had access to that file, if it was already downloaded or copied, it meant the recordings were no longer contained. They were out there, somewhere, and the countdown to exposure had just begun. Because once those recordings surfaced, and they would surface, the truth wouldn't just damage reputations. It would threaten the very foundation of royal privacy itself. But what exactly was on those missing recordings? What did Prince William say that was worth hiding? And who exactly took them? Those were the questions that would soon explode across the world. Because the next file recovered, the second drive, held an answer that no one in the palace was ready to face. And what came next would change everything. It was never meant to be heard. A single phone call, one that should have lived and died within the walls of royal privacy. But somehow, against every protocol, every layer of security, every unspoken family code, it was recorded. The call that changed everything. The one that exposed wounds too deep for cameras and courtiers. The date was January 8th, 2020, the same day the world learned that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were stepping back from royal life. The headlines that morning were brutal. The Sussexes quit the firm, royal split rocks the monarchy, palace in shock. But before the world knew, there had been that call. The one between Prince William, King Charles, and senior aides. Their private crisis meeting. The FBI named it File 27B, but inside royal circles, it became something else entirely, the betrayal tape. Let's step into that moment. It's late afternoon in Sandringham, England. The wind cuts through the trees, and the estate feels heavy, tense. Inside one of the smaller drawing rooms, a phone sits on a polished table, secure line, encryption verified. William's voice comes through first. Calm, but brittle. "Father, we can't control this anymore. They've gone public without telling anyone." Charles sounds weary, older than his years. "I spoke to Harry this morning. He said they were cornered." A pause. "Cornered," William repeats, disbelief sharpening his tone. "By who? The media? Or her?" That, her, wasn't said with malice, not yet. It carried something worse, disappointment. The line goes quiet. You can almost hear the weight of history pressing on them. Charles exhales. She believes the institution has failed her. Then William, the voice of a brother and a future king, answers quietly. She's not the only one who feels failed. Those were the words that hit hardest. The kind that linger in silence. Now imagine, somewhere across the ocean, in California, a small device synced to that very call. Recording, storing, preserving every pause, every breath, every heartbreak. The FBI later confirmed that the signal was routed through Harry's mobile, an automatic sync Meghan had installed months earlier as part of her media control system. The same system hidden behind that mirrored wall in Montecito. That's how this call, this deeply human, painfully raw exchange, became part of Project Windsor. Halfway through, the tone shifts. The conversation becomes emotional. "Charles, we can't have them blindsided again. The press is waiting for blood." William, "Then why did he do it, father? Why announce without warning?" Charles, "He said they needed to take back their narrative." William, "Their narrative? It's not a brand. It's our family." The words cut deep. You can hear the frustration trembling in William's voice, the sound of someone trying to hold together a kingdom and a brotherhood at the same time. Charles tries to calm him, but William continues. "She's changed him. I barely recognize the man I grew up with." And then the silence. Charles, you can't say that. William, I just did. For a moment, you hear only breathing. Then Charles adds, almost pleadingly, don't make this about her. They're scared. We all are. The irony of that sentence is chilling, knowing now that it was being recorded, that even as Charles spoke of fear, someone miles away was listening. But the part that truly unsettled investigators came next. An unnamed aide joins the call, advising that statements be prepared to protect the Crown's image. William's voice hardens. Then we control the story before she does. We can't let her turn this into another public circus. That phrase, control the story, echoed through the investigation. It revealed not just royal strategy, but the paranoia both sides were drowning in. Because at the very same moment William spoke those words, Meghan was already several steps ahead, building her archive, scripting her truth, piece by piece. And this recording proved she'd been doing it long before anyone realized. But here's the twist. As the call continues, another voice is faintly audible, one that shouldn't be there. A female voice. Soft. American. Harry, are you sure this is safe? The line glitches, then goes silent. That tiny fragment, that whisper, changed the entire nature of the file. Forensic audio experts later confirmed that the interference came from another device linked to the same network as Harry's. Meaning, at the moment of the royal call, Meghan's system wasn't just recording, it was listening live. Think about that. A private royal call, meant to mend a family rift, was being monitored from another continent in real time. Even the most seasoned investigators described the discovery as unnerving. Not because it was illegal, though it was, but because it was intimate. A breach not of security, but of trust. When the agents first replayed the segment, the room reportedly fell silent. Not a word, not a breath. Only the sound of a family fracturing across two worlds. And then, the last line before the call ended. Charles, whatever happens, we keep this within the family. William agreed. The irony is painful, because within days, that recording would fall into the hands of people far outside the family. One FBI analyst described it perfectly. It wasn't just a call, it was a confession. The kind that doesn't belong in the press, but in history books. But before they could fully process what they were hearing, the agents discovered something even stranger, a transcript attached to the file. Typed, edited, with notes. And at the bottom, a signature, MM. Meghan's initials. She hadn't just recorded it. She'd transcribed it, word for word. That meant she had listened more than once, replayed it, studied it, documented it. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. And when the FBI decoded her metadata, they found timestamps showing she'd accessed the file multiple times over several months, each time after a major public royal event. Almost as if she'd been waiting for the right moment to use it. Use it for what? Insurance? Revenge? Narrative control? No one knows for sure. But her handwritten digital notes offer a haunting clue. Next to the transcript, she'd typed a single line. History won't protect them. Truth will protect me. That sentence sent shivers down every investigator's spine. Because in that one line, you can feel everything. The anger, the fear, the obsession with control. But here's where things take another turn. When forensic teams analyzed the drive further, they found another version of the same file, slightly edited. In this version, William's words had been trimmed. His most emotional sentences replaced with silence. The file name? Final draft. That meant she'd been preparing something, possibly for release. A version polished, cleaned, and ready for public consumption. If that's true, it means Meghan wasn't just recording history. She was producing it. And this, more than anything, is what horrified the investigators. Not because she broke the law, though she did, but because she blurred the line between truth and performance so perfectly that even the FBI struggled to separate the two. And in the process, she didn't just capture a family's pain. She rewrote it. By the time agents brought the file to Washington for digital preservation, it had already leaked internally. Someone, perhaps a mole, perhaps a hacker, had accessed snippets of the transcript. Within days, British media started publishing suspiciously accurate quotes from unnamed palace sources. It was clear the recording was out. The palace went into crisis mode. William's team issued quiet denials. Charles's advisors urged discretion. And Harry said nothing. He couldn't. Because deep down, He must have known how the recording was made, or at least suspected. He'd seen her working late at night, staring at the screens, adjusting the mics. He'd heard her talk about documenting everything. He probably even believed her reasoning, that it was about safety. But now, that safety had become a weapon. And as the royal family scrambled to contain the fallout, Meghan remained silent. No statements, no interviews, only a short message to her legal team. They'll realize why I did it soon enough. The public, however, wasn't ready for that reason. Because what the FBI was about to uncover next, hidden inside a folder buried deep within her system, would make this January call look tame. It wasn't just about family politics anymore. It was about something far bigger. Hollywood connections, media manipulation, and a web of power stretching far beyond Buckingham Palace. And when investigators opened that next folder, labeled Project Media, what they found connected everything, from the leaks, to the interviews, to the PR campaigns that had shaped the narrative for years. The story wasn't about one call anymore. It was about control, who had it, who lost it, and who was willing to burn everything to keep it. And what came next would change everything. Money talks. But in Hollywood, secrets scream louder. When the FBI began analyzing Meghan Markle's hidden drives, they expected to find private family recordings, maybe even proof of internal disputes. What they didn't expect was Hollywood. Not the red carpet glamour kind. Not movie scripts or celebrity contacts. But emails, contracts, and wire transfers, connecting the Duchess of Sussex to a shadow network of image consultants, crisis managers, and reputation architects. These weren't ordinary PR agents. They were professionals who specialized in manipulating public narratives, the same kind used by political campaigns, CEOs under investigation, and high-profile celebrities in scandal management. And they all traced back to one woman, a name that, until now, had only floated around the background of celebrity rumor blogs. Ava Branson. Ava wasn't just any publicist. She was a fixer. Her clients called her the ghost in the algorithm, because she didn't just spin stories, she buried truth. She could flood the internet with counter-narratives, suppress trending keywords, and plant subtle headlines to sway global opinion. And buried deep inside Meghan's hard drives were payment receipts, not to Ava directly, but to one of her shell companies. The description line read simply, Media Strategy Consultancy. To the FBI, that wasn't an expense. It was a cover. Because right next to those invoices were encrypted files labeled campaign metrics, influencer coordination, and media seeding reports. Each one outlined patterns. Coordinated social media pushes coinciding with every major royal controversy. When a negative headline hit Meghan, a counterwave of positive stories appeared online within hours. New hashtags trended, tabloid narratives flipped, and anonymous sources emerged to shift blame elsewhere, often back toward the palace. The FBI's digital analysis revealed hundreds of synchronized posts from verified influencer accounts, all originating from a small network of digital marketing firms in Los Angeles, Vancouver, and New York. The payments for those campaigns, all linked back to Meghan's foundation accounts. Now here's where things get chilling. Alongside the social media coordination, investigators found draft statements and talking points, not written by Meghan, but by Ava's team. Documents with sections titled Leverage Points, Narrative Angles, and Crisis Response Matrix. One line stood out above all. Keep emotional focus on victimhood. Deflect from power dynamics. Reinforce narrative of survival. It was a script, a strategy, and it had been carefully executed across every interview, every documentary, every speech since Megxit. But that was only half the story. The FBI found emails dated months before the Oprah interview, showing correspondence between Ava's team and executives from two major streaming platforms. The subject line, Royal Exposé Project, Concept Proposal, and attached was a pitch deck, complete with outlines, key themes, and even potential episode titles. The kicker? The proposal was dated before Meghan and Harry officially left royal life, meaning the so-called spontaneous departure might not have been spontaneous at all. It might have been scripted. Now pause for a second. Ask yourself, could it really be that calculated? The more agents read, the clearer the picture became. Meghan hadn't just wanted to escape the royal family. She wanted to replace it with her own media empire. Inside a folder labeled MHR Initiative, The FBI found outlines for documentaries, podcasts, and public campaigns centered on reclaiming royal narratives through authentic storytelling. One subfolder, Phase 2, even mentioned plans for fictional dramatizations of royal life, described as truth-inspired stories. It was bold, it was dangerous, and it blurred the line between truth and entertainment so perfectly that even investigators couldn't tell which was which. One agent summed it up perfectly in their report. This wasn't escape, it was rebranding. And that's when they discovered something even more explosive: the connection between these Hollywood plans and the secret recordings found in the hidden room. A document titled Royal Reference Materials contained detailed summaries of the very same phone calls and meetings Meghan had secretly archived. They weren't just personal backups. They were being used as source material. Think about that for a second. Private royal conversations, recorded without consent, being repurposed into entertainment narratives. Rewritten, edited, marketed to the FBI that crossed every ethical boundary imaginable. And yet, in Hollywood, it was genius. But here's where the story turns from strange to sinister. A second name began appearing alongside Ava Branson's, a name the British press had once whispered about during Meghan's earliest days of fame. Marcus Anderson. Yes, that Marcus Anderson, the Soho House executive, Meghan's longtime confidant, the man often described as her link to power. He wasn't just a friend, he was a broker. And among the documents found in Meghan's digital archives were meeting notes between Marcus, Ava, and Meghan herself. The subject, Project Reclaim. The objective? To build a multimedia narrative redefining Meghan as the modern, silenced royal fighting back against the institution that tried to destroy her. In other words, not just a story, a global brand identity. The FBI's data reconstruction even showed how Marcus personally introduced Meghan to key investors behind one of Hollywood's most aggressive production firms, the same firm that bankrolled celebrity expose docuseries with massive reach. Payments totaling millions flowed through consulting entities, and one ledger, recovered from an encrypted drive, listed these very words: "Advance secured upon proof materials." Proof materials. The agents looked at each other. They realized exactly what that meant. Those secret recordings, those private royal phone calls, were her proof. The leverage that opened Hollywood's doors. And once that realization sank in, everything started making sense. Her Netflix deals, her Spotify contract, her interviews, her silence during key moments. It was all part of a larger play, a trade of secrets for opportunity. One insider later told investigators, she didn't sell the truth. She licensed it. And while that line might sound poetic, it exposed the cold reality beneath the glitz. Every royal recording, every carefully leaked headline, every whispered story had a price. But not all the buyers were from Hollywood. The FBI traced communications between Ava's agency and a European media group known for pushing anti-monarchist content. Emails revealed discussions about exclusive insider materials and pre-cleared excerpts. In plain English, royal leaks for sale. That discovery changed the tone of the investigation entirely. It was no longer about reputation control. It was about potential espionage-level dissemination of royal intelligence. Because while Meghan wasn't a spy, the data trail looked disturbingly similar to operations involving coordinated information warfare. Even the encryption standards used on her drives matched those used in professional media security systems, the kind typically reserved for film studios guarding unreleased content. Except in this case, the content wasn't a movie. It was the monarchy. When British authorities were quietly briefed about the findings, they were stunned. One insider from the Home Office reportedly said, this wasn't a media scandal anymore. It was a national security concern. And that's when London got involved. Behind closed doors, UK officials requested access to the FBI's findings. They wanted to know how deep it went, who knew, who paid, and whether any of the recordings had already been distributed overseas. The investigation grew tentacles. Multiple agencies, confidential meetings, whispers of data leaks, and royal compromise. But for Meghan, none of that was visible yet. While the storm built behind the scenes, she continued living her public life, smiling for cameras, attending galas, giving speeches about truth and empowerment. The same truth she had rewritten in her own voice. And here's the tragic irony. Hollywood loved her for it. Because in their world, Controversy isn't poison. It's currency. Every scandal fueled her story. Every backlash made her more relevant. And every secret file she held became a bargaining chip in a game few people ever win. But while the FBI pieced together her digital empire, one question lingered. If Meghan had built this intricate network of media control, who else helped her maintain it? Because systems this large don't run alone. That answer would come soon, from someone no one expected to talk. A woman who'd been at her side for years. A woman who knew what went on behind those mirrored walls. Her former assistant. The whistleblower. And what she revealed would blow the case wide open. Because her testimony didn't just explain how Meghan built her secret empire. It exposed why. And what came next would change everything. Every story has its vault. That one place where the truth is locked away, waiting to detonate. For Meghan Markle, that vault wasn't metaphorical. It was real. Hidden, encrypted, and deliberately constructed to hold the kind of secrets that could bring down kingdoms. The FBI called it the Royal Archive. At first, investigators thought it was simply another folder, part of her elaborate Project Windsor network. But once they accessed it, they realized it wasn't just another drive of recordings. It was a collection of leverage. The kind of leverage that could silence critics, that could bend narratives, that could make even the most powerful royals tread carefully. Let's go inside that archive. It started with a single click. A folder nested beneath layers of decoy files, fake charity proposals, tax forms, recipe notes. Buried beneath all that fluff sat a password-protected directory labeled insurance. It took the FBI's cyber team 2 days to crack. When they finally did, a black screen flickered to life. There were no subfolders, no thumbnails, no structure. Just a scrolling list of file names that seemed to go on forever. Each one bore the same naming convention. Date. Initials, location. The initials were what caught their attention. CW, KC, W, C, CNC. Even H. It didn't take long to decode. Charles Windsor, King Charles, William, Camilla, and Harry. Each set of initials marked an audio or video file, hundreds of them. Personal conversations, private dinners, phone calls, and meetings that were supposed to be sealed in royal confidentiality. The first file they opened was short, only 2 minutes long. It captured Charles's voice, weary and distracted, speaking with an aide about media coverage. Nothing illegal, nothing scandalous, but personal, raw. Then came the second file, William's voice. This time, emotional. He was venting frustration about the impossible situation of his brother's departure. And though his tone was calm, his words cut deep. He said, "You can love someone and still not trust what they've become." That single line, private, vulnerable, human, summed up the entire royal divide. But what chilled the agents wasn't what was said. It was the quality of the recordings. Crystal clear. Studio grade. Whoever captured them had access to devices far more advanced than any average consumer tool. Meaning this wasn't amateur work. This was deliberate surveillance. Some of the recordings included faint ambient noises, sounds from the other end of phone calls, the quiet tapping of laptops, a dog barking in the background. The timestamps showed the recordings spanned 5 years, starting before the wedding, continuing through the Sussex's royal exit, and ending mere weeks before the FBI raid. Now here's where the story turns darker. Every one of those files was accompanied by a text document, Meghan's own written reflections, each titled Context Notes. In them, she summarized what was said, who said it, and how it could be perceived. Almost like a producer's commentary, assessing tone, emotion, and potential media value. One note next to a conversation with Camilla read, "Public will empathize with this tone, maternal but cold. Could be reframed as manipulation if needed." Another next to a William clip said, "Tone defensive. Protecting monarchy at all costs. Perfect angle for hypocrisy narrative." Each note ended with one chilling phrase. Hold for leverage. That's when it hit the FBI. This wasn't a diary. This was a blackmail catalog. The agents went silent. They were staring at a digital time bomb, capable of shattering reputations and rewriting royal history overnight. Now imagine this. Rows of officials and analysts in a Los Angeles evidence lab, listening through headphones to private royal moments, laughter, arguments, heartbreak, each one more personal than the last. And then they found the one that broke them. a video file titled KC_private garden_2019. When they played it, the screen filled with grainy footage of King Charles walking through the Clarence House gardens, talking quietly to an advisor. The conversation was about health, stress, and burden, deeply private matters. The audio had been captured remotely, likely via synced microphone from a personal phone. The footage shouldn't have existed. It was invasion, plain and simple. And yet, it was saved, backed up, and cataloged for future use. A federal agent reportedly muttered, "This isn't a backup. This is a hostage situation." But the real shock came when they discovered who else appeared in those files. Not just royals, but foreign diplomats, media moguls, and Hollywood power players. Meghan hadn't only been recording family. She'd been recording meetings, private dinners with executives, conversations with attorneys, strategy calls about deals. Every word documented, time-stamped, and sometimes annotated. The archive didn't just contain secrets, it mapped alliances. Emails attached to the files revealed she had shared select materials with trusted intermediaries for protection purposes. Meaning, even if her systems were destroyed, copies existed elsewhere. Encrypted, offshore, untouchable. It was the perfect safety net. If anyone tried to silence her, she could expose everything. One note even spelled it out clearly. "They can't bury me if I already own the shovel." And that's when the FBI realized Meghan Markle hadn't just built a wall around herself. She'd built a fortress of information warfare. To make things worse, there were indications she had considered using some of these recordings to recontextualize royal conversations for media projects. Her notes referenced sound design cues, narrative tone, and voice overlay options. Was she planning to use real royal audio in dramatized productions? If true, it was unprecedented, both legally and ethically. And then came the folder that changed everything. For release, if needed. Inside were 8 audio files and 1 video clip, all tagged with Meghan's initials and notes like controlled leak potential and sympathy angle. Each one portrayed a royal figure in a compromising light, emotionally, politically, or morally. One in particular featured William discussing frustrations over institutional image versus humanity. Nothing criminal, but edited cleverly, it could look cold, even manipulative. That folder was her nuclear option, a final layer of protection, her way of saying, "If you ever turn on me, I can end you." And yet, for all her precision, she made one fatal mistake. Among the metadata, investigators found traces of deleted drafts, fragments of recordings that had been cut and reassembled. The edits were sophisticated, but not perfect, and they revealed the truth. Several of these so-called authentic recordings had been altered, phrases swapped, context removed. She hadn't just been documenting truth. She'd been editing reality. That discovery shifted the narrative yet again, because suddenly, no one knew which clips were real and which were manipulated. The line between truth and fabrication had disintegrated. When the FBI reported this to their British counterparts, chaos erupted behind closed doors. Was Meghan simply paranoid and delusional, or had she been running a deliberate campaign of psychological control, both over Harry and the monarchy itself? The palace, for once, went silent. No statements, no comments, only whispers of emergency legal teams being briefed in total secrecy. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, public curiosity exploded. Speculation filled tabloids and forums. Rumors of hidden royal tapes dominated every headline. But none of them knew the true scale of what was sitting in federal custody. Hundreds of hours of footage, a narrative goldmine too dangerous to ever see daylight. And the irony? In that sea of deceit, pain, and manipulation, one recording stood out. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't political. It was intimate. Harry's voice, again. This time, he was talking to Meghan, unaware he was being recorded. He said, quietly, "You don't have to prove anything to them. Just be with me." And her reply, calm, measured, sent shivers down every listener's spine. "I can't stop now. Not when I'm this close." That line became the turning point for investigators, because it revealed motive, not protection, not self-defense, but obsession. She wasn't collecting data out of fear. She was doing it out of compulsion, to control her own narrative and everyone else's. When the FBI briefed the Justice Department, one senior official summarized it bluntly. This isn't about privacy anymore. This is about power, obsession, and control. And just when they thought they'd seen it all, a new name appeared inside the metadata logs. A login from a second user accessing the archive remotely. Someone who'd been syncing data from another device. The username? HM. Harry Markle. Meaning one of two things. Either he'd been helping her, or he had no idea she'd used his digital footprint as the key to record it all. Whichever it was, it meant the story was far from over. Because that single discovery, that hidden dual access, would trigger the next stage of the investigation. The confrontation, the interrogation, and the unraveling of the marriage itself. The truth was about to leave the vault, and what came next would change everything. There are moments in life that act like loaded guns, quiet, polished, waiting for someone to pull the trigger. For the royal family, that moment was buried inside a single audio file. It was labeled The Conversation 2021/confidential. No date, no location, no clue. But the initials next to it, W.C.A., told the FBI exactly who they were about to hear. William, Charles, advisor. And this was the one file everyone feared. Agents had already seen what Meghan's archive contained. Snippets of family pain, fragments of betrayal, whispers of power. But this one was different. It was organized, pristine, and marked in Meghan's notes with 3 chilling words. Use only if cornered. That meant one thing. This wasn't just another recording. It was leverage.